It's the champ, Shannon the Cannon, two-time heavyweight champion of the world. And you're watching Sports Icons. Subscribe. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Let's go, champ. Champ.
So, fresh on a victory over Roy Jones Jr. this past weekend, as in I believe that it was a victory, but officially it was a draw. Unofficial draw, of course, but the result doesn't really matter. But Big George Foreman, of course, a legend of the boxing world champion, in fact, oldest world heavyweight champion that as well. The face of the Forman Grill, and I am only one of 87 people that he follows over on Twitter. So big up Sporting Icons. Now, George Foreman, he believes that what he's seen with Iron Mike Tyson this past weekend against Roy Jones Jr., given the right kind of management and the right opponent, Mike Tyson could become heavyweight world champion once more. Not only that, but of course beating George Foreman's record for age as well. And if he was to do that, there'll be quite some distance for him to do that as well. Now, based on what it was that we saw against Roy Jones Jr., is that possible? I mean, there's a couple of ways of looking at it. First and foremost, how much did Mike Tyson hold back? Because he didn't want to hurt Roy Jones Jr. Because he knew it was an exhibition. How much was he really holding back? There's one thing. The other way to look at it is that while he looked great for 8 rounds, first and foremost, they were 2-minute rounds, and while he wasn't gassing, it was Roy Jones Jr. that was breathing more heavy. That'll be arguable. But nothing was coming back at him. He wasn't getting hit back. And when you get hit back, that's going to sap your energy a hell of a lot quicker than what it would if you were just the aggressor. It really would. Now, if we were to look at the current heavyweight champions right now, of course, you've got Anthony Joshua and Tyson Fury. Would he beat either of those? Well, outside of a puncher's chance, and 54 years old or not, he is a heavyweight. He can still punch very, very hard. If he was to catch one of them clean, they may well go. But we could be saying that about Mike Tyson when he's 64. He's 54 right now. So when he's 64, hey, I mean, you wouldn't make him a favourite against either of those. But there is another world champion out there, not one that we talk about too much, but officially he is a world champion. Of course, I'm talking about Manuel Charr. Manuel Charr, WBA regular world heavyweight champion. Now, the regular belt, that is the one that has the history, not the super, which is what Anthony Joshua has right now. So Manuel Charr is, for all intents and purposes, a world champion, believe it or not, even though he hasn't fought for the past 250 years, is what it is. But Mike Tyson against Manuel Charr, could he beat Manuel Charr? Again, even though it's Manuel Charr, where most people could probably beat Manuel Charr right now, you probably still have to make Manuel Charr a favourite in that fight. But not by a great deal, not by a great deal. So while I understand what George Foreman is saying, I can agree with him if it was against a Manuel Charr, for example, and Mike Tyson was holding back against Roy Jones Jr. If he wasn't holding back against Roy Jones Jr. and he gave everything that he had, then I'll have to say, no, sorry, George, I'm going to have to disagree with you on this one. But hey, at the end of the day, this is boxing. Everything is subjective. Who knows until we actually see it? Would Mike Tyson want to return to the professional game? Is he interested in becoming a champion again? Mike Tyson said that he's doing this for charitable work. Of course, he's making some money himself. Of course he is. But it's all about the charity. It's not about the belts and that anymore. He doesn't care about the belts. Belts don't put food on the table. And that's essentially true. But would he want to become the oldest ever heavyweight champion of the world? Well, it might tempt him. It depends on Mike Tyson's ego, doesn't it? It really does depend on his ego. It would be dependent on who he fights next over his next 2 or 3 exhibition fights, because Mike Tyson, he did say after the fight, in the post-fight interview, that he wants to be fighting another 10 more times if necessary. If he had his way, he'd fight every 2 months in an exhibition fight. So he feels really good, which is great. But would he become heavyweight world champion again? You wouldn't favour it. You really wouldn't favour it. But you know what? It'll be interesting if he decided to jump back into the professional ring with smaller gloves, 3-minute rounds, against a world champion, whomever that may be. Well, we'd watch it, wouldn't we? Of course we would. Anyway, drop your thoughts below about it. Click thumbs up, subscribe. Catch you all in the next video.